I'm curious what you think about the president's comments on Iran, because surely Iran is not the only one in the region that is sponsoring terrorism and putting money into the pockets of those that wish to do us harm or others.
Absolutely. His first point actually was to mobilize the Arab and Muslim world, talking with 50 of their leaders against ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and to end that organization, that network of jihadi organizations. But the second most important threat, which geopolitically is the first because of the capacities and capabilities of the Iranian regime, is the Khomeini regime, because it is present in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen. Now, if you're hinting at the fact that other countries had individuals or influential individuals sending donations to jihadists, absolutely. This is why he addressed the Saudis themselves and the Gulf, telling them that from now on we're going to be cutting off any financial aid, even going from your individual citizens to anything that looks like jihadists.
And what will that look like? What will actually hold the individuals accountable if they are funding terror from within Middle Eastern countries?
These are individuals who in the past thought that by supporting financially a jihadi organization or a movement, that goes in line with the dominant ideology. So what is going to be changing is that the Saudis, the Emiratis, and other members of the Gulf, to begin with, are going to make public statements telling their individuals, you do not have the right to send your petrodollars or your dollars to any of these organizations. So the governments are going to be on board with the United States to stop it. Second, there's going to be something more important, Jenna. This center of combating extremism is more than counterterrorism. It's basically to propose reforms in the educational system of all these countries, including the religious institution. That's what Egypt has done over the past 2 to 3 years. So we are about to see a renaissance coming in stages, of course.
Interesting. So how optimistic are you about that move and whether or not it will actually produce real change that will, at the end result, make us safer? Because that is the goal. We do not want terrorism, and we don't want it coming to our shores. So what is the practical effect, and what is the timeline on seeing a practical effect that this is actually a change in the making?
Look, we've been, as the United States, calling for this to happen for the past decade. But this administration, and I would say even this Congress with the administration, are moving forward to actually basically tell that part of the Arab world, you are afraid of Iran, Hezbollah, and their allies are going after you. So you help us against the jihadists, not just on the ground, but the ideological battle. And we are with you to contain Iran. That's the real equation that is happening. So I'm pretty confident that based on geopolitical interests, Saudi, the Gulf, and other Arab and Muslim countries will be helping us against this ideology.
You know, it's interesting. Every time we talk, Walid, you remind us and our viewers, and by the way, this is tape from earlier. It's a little bit unrelated to what we're talking about, so perhaps we can take it off the screen. But this is the First Lady and Ivanka Trump. They were visiting the Western Wall. One of the things that you remind us when we talk, Walid, is that there are many priorities in the Middle East. But as you see it, Iran is the #1. So although there's issues that we have to deal with, you still see Iran as the top priority that we really need to confront as far as a threat, a national security threat. I'm curious what opportunities are actually emerging from the region because of what's happening internally in some of these countries. Saudi Arabia, for example, has huge youth unemployment. They have some questions about the future of their economy. Israel's dealing with some of its own issues internally. So not just what we do, but the region. What sort of opportunity do you see emerging from the region because of where we're at and where some of these countries are at?
Each country in the Middle East has its own problems, and President Trump told them the United States is not going to be there to solve all these problems. We're going to try to address the common problem. And if you look at Saudi, for example, yes, it has a series of issues, including the level of freedoms, what the generations want, so on and so forth. But its major problem now is that the Iranians can cause havoc, not just on its borders in Yemen, but inside Saudi Arabia. If you take Israel, Israel has a whole issue with the peace process not being accomplished yet. But it has Hamas, which is backed by the Iranians. Lebanon has the same problem with Hezbollah, and so on in Iraq and in Syria. So our calculation is that across the region, you have a web which is controlled by the Iranians. So you have to deal with Iran to relax the region. Then we could go and address the other problems, economic or social.
Again, we're looking at themes, and I just want to remind our viewers, last week one of the big news items was that we pushed back by show of force in Syria. Pro-Assad forces on the ground inside Syria. It turns out, we learned later in the week, that the pro-Assad forces were indeed Iranians. And so again, watching these themes as they emerge over the last few days and moving ahead. Walid, great to have you on our program. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.